just want you all to know that I do not plan on putting anything there that would affect my house either that I want to do. I want to keep the property nice. I want to keep a nice buffer. I just want to raise my children like I was brought up on the property. That's all I want to do. My father, we want to rezone the front, keep something commercial up front. I want to keep it nice in the back. I do not want to affect anything in the back or anything on the property. I want to keep it nice. I've grown up on that property. I've been right there in the middle of the cars my whole life. I'd like to get my children away from it, keep a nice yard for them to play in and everything. That's all I'm going to say. Anybody have any questions for me? I appreciate whatever you guys can do.
Anyone else? Now we open up the remonstrance, and I just remind everybody to state your name and your address when you get up here to speak. Anybody that would like to get up and speak, I suppose Mr. Arnez, now would be your chance.
No.
Now it's on the record, Mr. Arnez.
My name is Dick Arnez. Arnez, easy. Arnez. I live in Carlton, I live 20. You just heard some more, you mentioned the groundwater. Absolutely. How many Superfund sites do we have in town? You want to take a chance with another one? You've got another one coming from Millville into North Smithfield. It's going to add to your problems. All I want you to do is, with due diligence, pay attention to this one. I also mentioned to you, the heck with this. Do this for this guy, do this for this guy. Nah, boy. Just pay attention to the ordinances, okay? Reason? Look at Carlton Avenue. You guys were all, you just heard about somebody building a barn, a house, a shed, or whatever, right on the road. Huh? That was done way back when the Perrys moved in there. We had I'd say a town administrator, a highway super, okay? They let that go through. Now it's coming back to bite you in the butt. You know what I'm saying? So what are you going to do, make another exception? You're going to put a 14-foot road in? Bad enough, they chop trees down, they pull stumps, they did a little imaginative grading. Nobody stopped them. Nobody. So I'm just telling you, do things by the ordinance, you can't come back to hurt you. Okay?
Thank you.
Welcome.
Anyone else?
Hi. Michael Marston, 27 Georgiana Avenue.
Can you speak into the microphone, please?
Michael Marston, 27 Georgiana Avenue.
Just spell your last name for me, sir.
M-A-R-S-T-O-N.
Thank you.
I wasn't at the November 19th meeting, but I did send Deborah a letter. My concerns were around traffic in that area. With Gators Pub, I would go through that intersection weekdays between 5 and 8 p.m. coming from Connecticut. And typically, it's more of a Gators issue, I guess. There's traffic on both sides of the street, people running back and forth across the street, and overflow parking in the area that's being designated for PH. So if there is more business that's built back in that area, it's going to be more than just a little problem. I think traffic's going to be much worse than it is today. The other thing I'd like to mention is if we're changing the zoning in that area, I looked up what the additional things are that could be built there if zoning is changed to be business. And I don't have a crystal ball. I can't say what's going to be built there. And it sounds like nobody really knows what's going to be built there at this time. But if you look at what the zoning would allow, it would allow things like fast food restaurants. It would allow things like outdoor amusements. So all I can think of is go-karts. I don't know what you can think of. It would allow things like a cell tower. 125-foot cell tower, which obviously would have all different antennas on top of it. And I think to myself, that's a 12-story structure. I'm sure that most of the residents in the area would be able to see it, given that most houses are 2 or 3 stories high. It would allow things like fitness centers. And I can tell you from driving down 102 that fitness centers has a lot of traffic between 6 a.m. and 8 a.m. and between 5 p.m. and 7 p.m. If you were to build something like that, it would make it even worse in that area. I've lived in the neighborhood for a little over 30 years now. I haven't been to these zoning meetings before, but just the concern over what could be built there, and I haven't heard what will be built there, so I can only assume what could be built there, and that concerns me. And whatever is built there will be vying for the same water that I drink out of my faucet, because nobody has city water. So if something is going to be built, we are, as a town, going to say, let's really, do business highway for a lot of 102. That's great, but somebody needs to put in city water, because I don't want to be drinking water that a car wash should be built under that designation. And with a car wash, again, they're going to be taking the same water that I'm drinking and discharging water wherever. Thank you for listening.
Anyone else?
Good evening. My name is Jeff Colentro. I live at 1304 Victory Highway. Collentro.
Thank you.
Okay. I have a lot to say. I live at 1304 Victory Highway. I've had a front row seat to this lot for 14 years. I bought my house in 2004, right next to Gators. I live in that house, the yellow house next to Gators. I take offense to some of the comments I've heard this evening about nobody would ever build a house on these lots. And who would build a lot on Victory Highway? Who would build a house on Victory Highway? My house is built on Victory Highway. It was built on a, pardon my French, a crappy old sand pit from years ago. And I don't know if anybody's seen my house. I think I did a pretty good job with it over the years. Landscaped it well. I pay over $6,000 a year in taxes. I maintain it. I live right on Victory Highway, right across from this lot. So when somebody says, who's going to build a house in that lot, I take offense to it because my house is right there. Okay? A couple things that I wanted to mention. Somebody mentioned ordinances. Ordinances are only good if the town enforces them. You can have ordinances that restrict groundwater and discharge or recharge or whatever it is. They're only good if somebody enforces them. In this town, I think, at least in my opinion, in the last 14 years, this town doesn't do a very good job of enforcing ordinances. We have zoning. Why do we have zoning? You mentioned, at the beginning of the conversation tonight. Why do we even have ordinances, or why do we have zoning if you're not going to enforce it? I agree with that. That lot across the street from my house, and I live right here. So again, my front row seat across there. That changed hands, what, I think 5-6 years ago. Mr. Russo bought that property. I've seen cars being sold on that lot. I noticed the picture's gone, the satellite photo that we had here last time, that showed all the junk cars in the back. So if we go change the zoning, who's to say that, that's what's going to happen? He wasn't adhering, or people weren't adhering to the zoning of the property in the first place. And for years, we saw cars being sold on a residential lot. And everybody saw it. It's right on Victory Highway. It's a busy road. So again, if you're not going to enforce any ordinances, enforce zoning, then why do we even have it? I'm not opposed to houses going over here, because I have a house on the property. I bought my property because that was zoned residential. I never would have bought my property for the price I paid for it if it was business highway across the street. And I did have people approach me when I was looking at the house 14 years ago and said, you know, they've tried to change the zoning on this lot across the street. And I was convinced by some people in the town, proponents of the town, wanted to see realtors that wanted to see people moving into town. That's residential. You don't have to worry about it. I know there's no promises in life. You guys can't guarantee anything, but I bought my property here knowing that that was zoned residential. So I really don't want to see that business highway, because my property value is going to take a huge tumble. I already deal with enough noise. I deal with enough traffic. 5 to 10 cars a week are turning around in my driveway, and I do know that because I work from home. They turn around in my driveway. Most of the time, they go back down to the strips at the corner because they miss the turns and everything. If there's businesses across the street from my house, forget it. I might as well put a circular driveway in front of my house and just let people come through it. I'll put up a toll gate maybe if they can make some money off it. But again, I wanted to have a voice, and I wanted people to know that I bought my property knowing that that was residential. This isn't personal against anybody. I would love to see a house over there, or houses, but I don't want to see another strip mall. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Rat? Mr. Ratcliffe?
Dave Sack, CZA, 25 Georgiana Avenue, Smithfield. I just have a few general words to say. I've been in town 45 years. And when I look at the zoning meetings,
Mr. Rapside, you can hold the mic.
Oh, sure.
Thank you.
yes, I've been in town 45 years, I've been on the finance committee. That's how you really determine the town's zoning. My general outlook is that the town should try to abide by a consistent master plan, not only for the town, but for the state, and that has been violated many times. If you talk about G. Moore, he zoned his property in half. And to the point that no house will be built on 102, that's true. That land was a hole in the ground. It's filled with telephone poles and stumps and every conceivable bit of trash. No, that land is not stable. So if the developer wants to put a house, it's going to run into a very, very difficult situation. I wish the town council would not look at the trade-off between higher taxes and the living environment of the residents. I know the taxes for a business bring in much more than a residence, but you must consider the quality of life. And to change any type of zoning, and remember, changing zoning means money. That's what it is. That's why there's so much politics involved in zoning. You must have an overwhelming reason to make a change. And you must be sure of traffic conditions. You could have a parking lot across the street from the biggest pub. The effect on the aquifer, which affects everybody in that neighborhood. Parking, again, that seems like a repeat, but parking is a real problem. And noise. And if, and I know it's difficult, if the town could stay in its industrial zoning, industrial park, and not move over to, well, it's not exactly spot zoning, but it's creep zoning. you move the residential to commercial to business, and even if that gets fudged, the difficulty is that many things were not enforced in the town, unfortunately, and what happens is these places get, that's correct, grandfathered. So you have violations of the new zoning laws, but people have been grandfathered in, and until they move out, you are, you're not going to change that. You might want to, if you have to make a decision, look at North Smithfield and Burrillville. Burrillville has a small tax base, so they're more willing to put about anybody in there, even the cell towers. North Smithfield did not. So maybe I'm seeing the rambling, and I wouldn't be so much if I looked into this in more detail, but there's a master plan zone, which has not always been abided by in this town, should be adhered to as much as humanly possible, unless, of course, there's an overwhelming reason. And the overwhelming reason, to repeat myself, should not be the tax revenue. Generally, $15,000 is taxes from a business, 4 or 5 from an individual house, on average. But there's more to it than that. If you want to attract people to the town, yes, you have to have an industrial zone, and I know that's not easy, especially in this state, which is so poorly run. And a living environment for the residents. Yes, taxes going to be high. That's another one. Okay, thank you for your time, and good luck making a decision.
Anyone else?
My name is Ward Maynard. I live at Ward, R-O-A-R-K, Ward Maynard. I live at 30 Georgiana Avenue. And first I'd like to congratulate you on being parents, the newly elected officials, and the returning. Just a couple things coming out. Obviously against the change to the business highway. One concern is the values, housing values and property values. And I'd like to just read a short part from a realtor's appraising residential properties textbook, and as it regards to housing values in the zoned area. Zoning regulations and building codes are important to the stability of a neighborhood. They provide legal protection against adverse influences, nuances, and hazards. Buyers seek out neighborhoods that have effective zoning laws, building codes, and housing and sanitary codes. The enforcement of these codes, regulations, and restrictions should be effective and equitable in comparison to the enforcement of competitive neighborhoods. When zoning variances are obtained easily and without consideration of their effort on surrounding houses, the value of these properties can be decreased. When existing zoning and building regulations are not enforced, the neighborhood property values can decrease. Changes in zoning may have positive or negative effects on the neighborhood as a whole. They can have different effects on individual properties in the neighborhood. For example, rezoning a corner site from residential to commercial use may have a negative impact on the neighborhood as a whole, even though it increases the value of that particular property. Hence, the best use Hence, the value of the subject potential properties should be considered. Next, I would like to point out, in the application that was made for the business highway change, that was done by the attorney, submitted by Attorney Timothy Dodd, it states, in regard to Mr. Russo, he has been in business for more than 40 years at this location and wishes to expand his business. What are we, which way is it? Is it expansion of the business, or is it doing something else? It also states, within the proposal, which would rezone Lot 45 in part to business highway classification, that is consistent with the comprehensive plan for the town of North Smithfield as it relates to future business highway development along Victory Highway. If Mr. Todd had done his due diligence, he would know that in the comprehensive plan, in section G314, that he wouldn't be able to expand it, given that he had previously stated in an application that he wanted to expand his business. Next, one of the other things I want to bring up was the residents' concern that was discussed at the beginning of this meeting was zoning violations. That is a big concern for the surrounding